Happy Sunday. Lots of love to you all, and this is going to be a super quick Q&A because on the main channel I'm little by little beginning to plan a lovely video for you about a question that keeps being asked, probably more than any other, repeatedly, about what is going on in Russia, what's going on with the Russian people. Today, we've got just 3 questions. Can you elaborate on your tweet about Putin in Kazakhstan? And I've said, look, Putin in Kazakhstan is the most relaxed and confident I've ever seen him. I mean, since February 2022. And that's for several reasons, which include, A, fanaticism. He is convinced that the war was necessary and defensive, and he thinks that enough of his court is ready to go all in with him. He thinks that he can still win, B, and C, Xi being re-elected in China is a bonus, big bonus for Putin. I think that the fanaticism there is utterly extraordinary, because here is a guy who thinks that it's not all that bad and not all is lost when things are going like they're going on the war front, and when things are going as badly as they're going with the mobilization, particularly in the sense of mobilization revealing the utter ineptitude of the state. You see, the extraordinary incompetence we've seen with Russia's very, very awkward attempt to mobilize militarily isn't specific to these enlistment and conscription centers. That's the whole country. I mean, the country has a completely dysfunctional bureaucracy, and the country does not work. This is not an authoritarian regime. This is not China. This is a country where stuff can't get done. And moreover, the war, the sanctions, and the mobilization are further corroding the apparatus of the regime to do anything effectively in domestic policy. It's quite extraordinary. And Putin is optimistic through all of this because he is sort of flying above the field of battle at a very high metaphysical altitude. He's isolated with this. I mean, there aren't many people around him who buy into his fantasies, except maybe one person, that's Kovalchuk. So it's quite extraordinary how out of touch he is. But I think there is also something that sort of tethers him to reality. And that's the idea that it's okay if there isn't a clear way through at the moment, because a couple of unforeseen events will arise, and when they arise, Mr. Putin, will react to them appropriately, and that'll change the situation. So there is this thing going on about him wanting to get lucky, the way we discussed on the Philosophy channel with that Machiavelli video, and politicians using occasions that are unforeseen and making their own luck during these occasions. So he's holding out for that. He's also aware that the sort of autoimmune dynamics in the court around him aren't aimed at him in the short term. I mean, they're people positioning and people trying to eat each other up, but they are not with a view to any kind of imminent move, against him. And then I think something that's really important is when a leader who is that established in a role and that experienced is so charismatically at ease, that really is hard to go against for people who are also in this kind of submarine, this kind of cocoon with him. Not the cocoon of his fantasies, but at least the cocoon of the circumstances, the cocoon of the failing war. So that kind of relaxation, I think, makes his fanaticism easier for people to comply with. And the feeling isn't that the war was right and necessary the way Putin thinks it was, but it's a set of very different views about the war, but then with this convergence that, well, now we're stuck in this kind of lane, and we're going into a dead end, but we can't reverse either. So we might as well go on and just hope something happens that creates a way through that at the moment we cannot see. What is happening with Girkin? Girkin seems to be going to the front, and I don't know what's happening with him. I think that there's a thought that might not be about Girkin that's nevertheless interesting to put on the table, and that's that they are going to be using mobilization as a way of getting at people who are awkward or people who are enemies. I'm not saying that's what happened with Girkin, but I'm saying that they will try to send people to the front who are politically or informationally awkward for them. I think that one of their thoughts with Girkin will be that the regime has very little interest in him getting captured, which probably increases the risk to his life that might come from some kind of a Russian agency too. But we need to see what happens. And now we've got a question I'll read out as anonymous about nuclear risk from a wonderful follower of the channels in Warsaw, who says, follow your stuff and I value your view. Could I ask you, would you move? Where would you move? If you had loved ones, and moving seemed to be a pressing question in the light of nuclear uncertainty, and how does that get weighed against practicality and cost? So very, very deeply and understandably concerned message that, in a sense, in two senses, I'm not qualified to answer. The first way I'm not qualified to answer is I don't know anything about military matters. I don't know anything about anything technical about nuclear conflict and nuclear weapons. And the second thing is that these are all personal decisions. So there's no way that I can give advice. I can tell you what I would do. And that's not an advice Vlad is giving as a political philosopher. That's just Vlad giving advice as Vlad. No, I wouldn't move. I wouldn't move. I wouldn't even be close to thinking that I need to move now. Here is one of the problems that's happened recently in the last few weeks. A lot of people in Moscow who are inside the regime, in fact, people in that big room where Putin was giving the speech about the annexation, and then he held hands with these dodgy characters. A lot of people in that room are genuinely talking about nuclear war, and they are talking about it with a degree of sincerity and anxiety, and they're even talking about targets. But I think that's a lot less worrying than it seems. And I think a few people were worried about this. And the trail of sources for this I regard as perfectly legitimate. So really people I trust have had conversations. And that seems to be what's going on. People who are non-names, insignificant folks in the regime are talking about nuclear war. But I think what's happening is that the top of the regime is deliberately leaking and making people who work for it at a lower level believe that this is serious. And I'm kind of 95% confident about this. So in this light, how I would approach moving out of anywhere, whether you're in Warsaw or in some other potentially dangerous bit in Europe, or indeed whether you're in Ukraine, I would say, look, a strategic nuclear exchange can't happen overnight, and arguably no use of nuclear weapons can just happen overnight. The circumstances need to be right for it. Um, and so what that means is that I think we are moving toward a moment of nuclear crisis. And that might happen, God knows when, if it happens. I would put that at 50-50 or over 50-50. I'm not using that as literal percentages because we're in the realm of uncertainty, not probability. So percentages are just psychological clues. But I think there is a 50-50 chance, at least, probably more, of a significant nuclear crisis. But we're not there yet, and we need steps to get there. It might occur in February, January, February. So my feeling is there are two kinds of people. There's the kind of person who just doesn't want to think about it, doesn't need to go there. And that's not irrational because the risk isn't so high that that would be completely crazy as an approach. No, it wouldn't be. And then there is the other kind of person who has a few thoughts about it and has a kind of implementation of a plan that if 2 or 3 visible steps of escalation occur and people I trust seem to be commensurately worried, then I will contemplate going somewhere. And in that case, I would hope to be sort of minimally prepared, and that might mean whatever. It might mean just having an idea of where to go, or having a bit more of a plan than that, or having a tiny bit of a financial buffer. But personally, I wouldn't move at the moment from anywhere. And it's really about seeing how that escalation develops. And if and when it gets worrying, then one could have the conversation of, do I want to be the kind of person who is being highly precautionary, or do I want to be the kind of person who says, I'm not going to build my life around these kind of crises and these kinds of risks, and I'm just going to gamble on it sorting itself out, which is the likely outcome. But likely like by not that much. So that's where I'm at. And I hope to see you, health allowing, soon on the main channel. I'm reducing for the last few videos just by a little bit, by quite a bit to be honest, the degree of editing I do. So I'm experimenting. So if I reduce the degree of editing quite a bit, then in the next couple of days we might see a video on the main channel. Talk very, very soon. Lots of love.